especially in the future, at lalong-lalo na para sa mga kabataan. Kasi kapag medyo nag-gets mo itong bagay na to na sinasabi ng psalmist sa binasa natin na passage, pag nag-gets mo yun, biglang, okay. So ganyan ang pananaw ko, ganyan ang response ko every time may ganito akong sitwasyon na pagdadaanan. We go back to Psalm 46, we begin with verse 8. It says there, "Come, behold the works of the Lord, how He has brought desolations on the earth." The second part of that statement really bothers me. Lord, you bring desolations on the earth? I mean, okay ka lang ba doon? Lord, parang, Lord, tulungan niyo po akong maintindihan yan. Ito matindi. Nung po pandemic, kasama yan sa mismo tanong. Did the Lord bring this upon us? Was it God who caused this? Now, I really don't have an answer to that also. But, coming from the passage, this is what I draw. Even in the midst of desolations, as God allowed these desolations, the Lord is still at work. Come, behold the works of the Lord. That even in the middle of your desolations, kung ano man ang pagdaanan natin na desolations sa buhay, mga bagay na mahirap, mga bagay na dead ends, mga bagay na imposible, lahat ng maaari mong pagdaanan na mahirap, even in the midst of that, come, behold the works of the Lord. The Lord is still at work. So even in the middle of a crisis like this one, binaha yung bahay mo, bagong-bago yung sasakyan mo lumubog. Oh man, kapapaayos mo lang ng bahay nito nakaraan, tapos biglang yung dahil sa buhos na yun, hindi pala maayos yung waterproofing na ginawa ng contractor mo. Parang, Lord, ano ba naman ito? Tapos maliban doon, may nagkasakit pa sa pamilya. Yung, alam mo yung, lalo na, okay na isang krisis tapos at least isa lang kakarapin mo, pero minsan nagpapatong-patong talaga sila. At pag nagpatong-patong na sila, yung mismong puso mo rin, Lord, hindi ko na ito kayang maintindihan, hindi ko na kaya pang manalig. In the middle of that, I pray, hear what the psalmist is saying. In the middle of your desolations, come, behold the works of the Lord. The Lord remains to be at work. Verse 9, he says, He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Yung pong phrase na He makes wars cease, ulit, medyo nahihirapan din ako dyan kasi tuloy pa rin ang Ukraine at saka Russia conflict. Tapos maraming nagbabadya in relation to China and several nations. And there are many other civil wars that are happening in separate nations. Lord, you're able to make wars cease. Bakit hindi niyo pa po ipatigil yung mga bagay na to? Ito, yung idea po ng war ceasing at kapag dumaan ka sa mga desolations, at work pa rin si Lord. All of that is drawn from who you know God to be. Faith in the midst of desolations is drawn from who you know God to be. Lord, alam ko po mabait kayo. Lord, alam ko po righteous kayo. Lord, alam ko po concerned kayo sa buhay ko. Lord, alam ko po may plano kayo para sa pamilya namin, may plano kayo para sa bansa namin, may plano kayo sa mundo. So kung alam ko na kayo ay mabait, you are a good God, you are my good Father, and you are almighty, you're able to move everything according to your plans and purpose, then even if there is desolation, even if the wars will continue, I can trust you, God. Maaari ko po kayong pagkatiwalaan. Now, let me propose a way that the Lord has made a war cease very recently. And I'm talking about our war with COVID. Hindi po alam ng mga tao, pero dumaan tayo sa giyera. Invisible lang yung giyera. At para sa mga kabataan, mahirap kasi hindi mo alam na giyera pala yung pinasok mo. Kaya minsan unprepared din tayo, parang hindi mo alam paano ba mag-respond na maayos. It's one barrage of difficulty after another. Nawala ng trabaho ang tatay mo, nagkasakit ang nanay mo, may namatay sa mga relatives nyo. Tapos biglang ang taas na ng mga bilihin, tapos biglang, hindi ka na makapag-aral, and so on, biglang sabay-sabay na siya. Tapos hindi mo na ihanda yung sarili mo kasi hindi mo naman alam, giyera pala itong pinapasok natin na to. But make no mistake, it was a war, it was an invisible war, it was a war that we just went through. I remember the stories ng lolo ko. Ang lolo ko po ay guerrilla. Guerrilla noong World War II. So, mga kwento nila to, yung halimbawa, tumatakas sila mula sa mga Hapon, punta sila sa may bundok, tapos yung lola ko papatigilin yung iyak ng isa sa mga, hindi ko po alam kung uncle ko, auntie ko, na kailangan takpan yung bibig kasi maririnig ng mga Hapon. Tapos they would go from place to place just to be able to live, just to be able to survive. And that was war. So, yung pong pinagdaanan nila na yung nagyera, for some reason, it also strengthened them after. Kaya lang ito, yung pinagdaanan natin na ito, hindi natin alam, gera pala yun. You actually have your own story to tell na. You've been through a war. And the Lord has caused, in a sense, caused that war to cease. There's two ways to overcome a war. Una, if you overcome the opposing army. Ito pong panahon na to, medyo palabas na tayo. Pa-post-pandemic era na. How do we know that? Kasi, well, for one, marami pa rin mga cases, pero yung mga anak natin pinabalik na sa klase. Tayong bansa na lang po yata ang natira, di ba? Na tayong pinakamatagal bago nang pabalik ng mga anak natin sa klase. Pero the fact na yung mga anak natin, nasa klase na, on-site na, ay ibig sabihin, panahon na. Lalabas na talaga tayo. Now the adults can come out because if we were brave enough to even expose our children outside, edi mas lalo na tayo. Ito na talaga yon. Kumbaga, pabalik na talaga dun sa kung anong itsura natin dati. We have overcome. Now, praise God for the advancements in medicine, in technology, that has now eventually resulted. Kasama din dun yung natural trend dito mismong pandemic. We've reached a certain herd immunity, ika nga. Tapos dahil doon, pag tinanong mo ngayon, kumusta, may lagnat ka, may buka, ano ba yan, trangkaso o COVID? Parang yung iba, kahit naman alin na nun. Ganun na rin naman, kasi nga medyo mild na po talaga yung mga resulta. Now, that is not to say na wala pa rin major na nagkakasakit. Meron pa rin po talaga yung mga may comorbidity specifically. Pero, ang punto ay, we have overcome. We're now at the tail end of the pandemic and we have overcome the opposing army. Pero may isa pa pong paraan para mag-cease ang mga wars. If you send peace terms of peace. Magpapadala ka dun sa opposing army ng terms of peace para itigil na natin yung giyera na to. Alam niyo po bang isang major na nangyari during the past 2.5 years? The gospel of peace has been brought to many people throughout the nations. Kasi nga, dumating sa punto ang mga tao na hindi na nila kung anong gagawin nila. They began to call on God. Once again, they have lost all self-reliance. Kasi dati nating mga pinanghawakan, dati nating alam, dati nating kakayahan, hindi kayang ma-overcome itong invisible na to na virus. Tapos biglang kumalat to sa buong mundo in an unprecedented way. Kasi nga, ngayon lang naman ganun kabilis na lumipat from nation to nation dahil sa air travel. So talagang sobrang pervasive yung kalat nitong virus. Hindi na natin alam ang gagawin natin, but for some reason, because of the online setup, because of communication also, nakarating yung gospel sa maraming tao. And the gospel of peace came to people. And that peace has overcome the war in their soul. Which is actually a bigger war that's going on. A war for the souls of men. We are at war when Jesus would say, and the kingdom of God is forcefully advancing and forceful men lay hold of it. When Jesus says, I will build my church and the gates of Hades will not be able to overcome. The church is advancing. We are in a spiritual war, and in that sense, we are also winning. Because the gospel of peace, the terms of peace has been brought to people, and people's souls have been saved. God was able to make wars cease. We've been through a war, and the Lord was able to make it cease by overcoming, for one, the virus, and pangalawa, from giving the terms of peace through the gospel. Which is why in verse 10 it says, be still and know that I am God. That whole idea na yung sa binasa po natin na ito na passage, may 5 tayong makikita na descriptions ng ginagawa ni Lord. Pero may isa doon na ikaw response mo. Ito yun. To be still. In the midst of desolations, in the midst of wars, because you know that God is able to make war cease, because you know, dahil alam mo, that the Lord is still at work in the midst of the desolations, you can be still. Hindi po ibig sabihin itong be still to be passive, or to be hopeless, to be helpless. Wala na, kaya mo na, bibitaw na ako. Lord, kunin mo na ako, Lord. Bibitaw na ako sa buhay. Ayan, hopelessness yan. Hindi po yan yun. Pero ang idea na to ng be still ay, Lord, it's a faith-filled response to the fact that God remains to be at work. It's a faith-filled response to the fact of who God is in relation to the world. That the Lord is still able to work through any and every situation. To be still means, Lord, itigil ako sa struggle ko. at magtitiwala po ako sa inyo. Marami tayong mga pinagdaanan sa buhay na iba-iba. Yung description po dyan, be still and know that I am God. Yun pong mga times na mas nakilala mo si Lord, it was actually during those times na super hirap ng mga pinagdaanan. Let me give an example. Si Abraham, di ba, 25 years siyang inantay si Isaac, finally dumating na si Isaac. Tapos bigla mo naman sinabi sa kanya ni Lord, after a few years, i-offer mo yan si Isaac sa akin. Teka lang, Lord naman, parang ano to, what are you talking about? I could imagine him struggling throughout the whole night, throughout yung buong gabi na yun, when he received that. Pero ito yung matindi. Early the next morning, he got up and then brought Isaac and then brought his servants and then they began to go there. So pag inisip mo, teka lang, what was happening there? We have a bit of a clue. Hebrews 11 and 12 will tell us that Abraham understood that God is able to make people rise back from the dead. God is able to make Isaac alive again. So, nung dumating siya sa ganong realization na isang imposibleng bagay maaaring gawin ni Lord, he became still. He stopped resisting. Tinanggap ang kalooban ni Lord. And now responded in alignment to God's will. He was still and he was learning who God was. Ito, what did he learn about God in that experience? Papunta na sila sa mountain and tanong si Isaac, Father, meron na tayo ng fire, meron tayo ng wood, pero nasaan yung sacrifice? Tapos ang sabi ni Abraham, anak, on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Abraham said it by faith. Abraham was beginning to recognize who God is. And that statement gave us the name Jehovah Jireh. The Lord who sees ahead. The Lord who has made provisions for your future. The Lord has made provisions for things that you are not ready for. God being provider because He sees ahead what you might need in the future. And true enough, on the mountain of the Lord, it was provided. Habang paakyat sila ng mountain, apparently, merong kakaiba rin kwento on the other side. For some reason, a ram got lost and then was going up a mountain. Why would a ram go up a mountain? Parang think about that for a moment. Why? Why would that even happen? So this ram was also going up the mountain until finally, nung sasaksakin na ni Abraham si Isaac, bilang in that moment, the angel stopped him from doing so. And then may narinig siya, meh! Nandun sa kabilang side, a ram caught by the thicket. Na parang, wow naman, tiniming talaga. Because the Lord was providing. And Abraham encountered God and encountered Him to be provider. Be still and know that I am God. In your darkest moments, God becomes clearest. Your understanding of who God is. At meron ka rin ganyang kwento. Sino siya sa'yo? Was He your healer, Jehovah Rapha? Was He your shepherd, took care of you in your darkest times, Jehovah Rohi? Was He with you during your most difficult times, Jehovah Shammah? Was He your peace during that time that you faced the greatest conflict in your life, Jehovah Shalom? Tapos yung pong mga pangalan na yun sa Scripture, lahat sila may kwento. Kasi yung mga bawat isa sa mga pangalan na yun ni Lord, kwento siya ng mga tao na na-encounter si God in that way in the darkest of times. Be still and know that I am God. When you let go of the struggle with the Lord, when you trust a faith-filled response, then in that moment, may the Lord reveal Himself to you in a powerful way and you will know Him like you've never known Him before. Be still and know that I am God. The latter part of that verse says this, I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And I read that and I realize, teka lang. Dalawang beses pang inulit. Talagang, I will be. This is a statement of resolve. This is a statement of direction. This is a statement of purpose. I will be exalted. And when God says that I will be exalted, it means He is working out His plan. Kung ano man ang plano ng Diyos para sa buong mundo, ginagawa niya. At ibig sabihin nun, kasama ang kwento mo. Kasama ang sitwasyon mo. Na iginagalaw ng Diyos para maluwalhatian siya, mabigyan siya ng luwalhati throughout the nations. I will be exalted. And you're His child. Which means this, as God is exalted, you will be exalted as well. And that gives us a very huge assurance. Biruin mo, 2 beses man sinabi. It's a huge statement of purpose that says, I am working out my purpose throughout the whole world. And finally, in verse 11, it says that the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. That word hosts talks about the angels of heaven. And I don't know if I got my numbers right now, pero I think in the Old Testament, one angel killed 185,000 Assyrians in one night. And that's pretty impressive. Parang, oh, I should na. Tindi nito, gano'n kaya kalaki yung mga masel-masel ng mamang yun, nung anghel na yun. Parang, wow, 185,000 na army, talagang isang gabi, tapos, wow, wasak sila lahat. O ito, imagine mo, milyon-milyon gano'n. Under the command of your God, the Lord of hosts. And the Lord of hosts is with you. The Lord of hosts is on your side. Will you be on His side as well? Will you be on His side too? You side with the Lord of hosts, and all of a sudden, you are protected. You are covered. You are surrounded by His hosts of angels, ready to support, ready to strengthen, ready for God's command to be able to fulfill what He has purposed in your life. The Lord of hosts is with you, and you can run to Him. He's your fortress. He's your refuge. A fortress is a place that you run to and then you're safe. In the midst of crises, kapag marami mga pinagdadaanan sa buhay, nagpatong-patong, takbo ka kay Lord. Tiyakin mo sa Kanya ka papunta pag tumakbo ka, hindi palayo sa Kanya. Madalas po ang mga tao, wala na. They give up on life and they just run away from God. No, instead, come on. Be still and know that God is God. In that moment, the Lord, binabangga ka ni Lord doon sa realidad na sino nga ba talaga ang Diyos? Ikaw ba o ako? Because most of the time when we struggle against God, we're actually trying to overcome the God of the universe and struggle against His will, and we're imposing our being God. Small g. Pero if you already come to the realization, hindi nga pala ako Panginoon ng buhay ko. Hindi nga po pala ako ang Master ng buhay ko. Kayo nga po pala, O Diyos. So I will be still and know that you are God. I loved it when I heard this phrase one time. I don't know who actually said it, but it said, for where there is crisis, Christ is. I like that. Uy, bigla. Uy, maalala ko yan. Parang, okay yun ah. For where there is crisis, Christ is. He's in the middle of that. The Lord of hosts is with us. He is with you. Another time, si Bishop Manny Carlos, he was preaching in one of our staff convergences sa Victory Fort. He was talking to all of us staff, and this was in the middle of the pandemic. At kinikwento niya, sabi niya, all around us, there is so much uncertainty. Which is why you hear this phrase often, these are times of uncertainty. Pero bigla siyang humirit, bumawi, sabi niya, no. These are times of certainty. Sabi niya, alam niyo kung bakit? Because in these times, we are certain of who God is. We are certain that He is at work in the nations. We are certain that He remains to be in control. We are certain that He's exalting His name. He is working out His purposes on earth. We are certain about these things, which is why you can remain steadfast. Ang steadfast po yung hindi natitinan. Ang dami na nangyayari sa paligid mo, tapos ikaw, okay, relax lang ako. Ba't ka relax? Kasi I'm still because I want to know Him to be God. I'm being still before God. I'm responding in stillness. I'm responding by trusting Him. I can be steadfast because these are times of certainty. Kasi sobrang very stark yung contrast ng who God is and what your situations are. Yung sitwasyon mo, puro uncertain. Pero si Lord, kilala mo siya. He is certain. Alam mo. So how can I be still? Why can I be still? Even in times of crisis. Because the Lord is at work. Because He can make war cease. Because He is God, period. Because He is exalting His name. Because the Lord of hosts is with us. Those 5 things we learned coming from that passage. The response on our end, be still. Be still. God remains to be God. One more story, and allow me to introduce, ito po ay family ng kapatid ko. His name's Kuya Gilbert, Pastor Gilbert. He was the one who shared the gospel with me when I was still in high school. He's 6 years older than I am. Tapos, nung early years na pagkatapos siyang graduate, tumulong po siya sa church plant sa Victory, San Fernando, La Union. He stayed there for around 11 years. Then after that, he brought his family na, and 5 na yung anak niya, brought his family back to Cavite, and we pastored together. Magkasama kami. I think he pastored Victory das Marinas for around 6 years. And then after that, they were sent out to be missionaries in Timor-Leste. Some of you might even be familiar kung nakasama kayo sa 10 days na pinadala ng Victory Santa Rosa sa Timor at least 3 times with you. Tapos nakakatuwa po, after 8 years, they raised local leaders and now they passed it on to a local leader named Stong. Siya na po yung nagpapastor ngayon ng church at bumalik na po sila rito sa Pilipinas. Pahinga lang ng konti and route to Pakistan to be able to help with another church plant there. So that's his life story. Pero ito po yung mga medyo pinagdaanan lang matindi. During his last 6 months, this was February of 2021, last 6 months niya sa Timor-Leste, he suffered a stroke. And the rest of those 5-6 months, hirap na hirap silang makauwi. Walang biyahe mula sa Timor, walang commercial flights, middle of the pandemic. Hindi sila makakauwi. It took them a while. Nakisakay sila sa UN, World Food Program. Para lang, through an NGO, nakisakay sila sa UN World Food Program para lang makauwi in 2 batches pa. 2 batches, 1.5 months apart. Yung kanilang pamilya. And then pagdating nila rito sa Pilipinas, his wife, Ate Shirley, was diagnosed with cancer. Pagdating dito. And now they're battling through it. So nag-extend sila ng konti dun sa kanilang furlough preparation para makapag-recover sila. Pero alam po ninyo, sobra akong amazed at how they responded. That they responded in faith. They did not, question the whole thing na, Lord naman, kita nyo naman, Lord, yung buong buhay namin, binuhos na namin sa inyo, Lord. All the way from church plants, leading a church, missions, we brought our whole family and all that. Instead of responding in that way, they were still. And they knew that God was God. They responded in stillness before the Lord. Quick question, what does it mean to be still? Let me propose 3 answers. We need to stop, we need to begin, and then we need to continue. Something. First, you need to stop resisting. Do you know the hymn, It is well with my soul? That's a moment that you stop resisting. Did you know that that was written by a man who suffered the loss of his daughters while they were traveling from America to Europe? In the olden days, na matagal pa po, inabot pa na 6 months yung mga biyahe over ship. And when he got, finally, nauna yung pamilya niya, wife niya lang ang nag-survive. Nag-telegrama mula sa Europe, sinabihan siya sa US. Bumiyahe siya. Nang makarating na siya rin sa spot, kung saan lumubog yung ship na sinakyan ng pamilya niya, doon niya po sinulat yung It is well with my soul. Doon niya sinulat yung hymn na, Lord, dami-dami nangyari. Pero Lord, it is well with my soul. I'll stop resisting. And I'll begin to accept and to be at peace with your will. Then, kapag meron ka na yan, then you can continue to wait. You'll wait on the Lord. To be still before God is not to be passive. You're waiting on the Lord, you're praying, and then you're going to act on His instructions so that what you do after will be aligned to His will, not resisting His will. That's what being still means. You know why? Because each of these times of crisis can be times of possibilities also. Bawat krisis po may posibilidad. Alam niyo kung bakit? Because God has promised. What the enemy has purposed for evil, He can turn it around for the good. Yeah. And of course, the promise of Romans 8:28, that God works all of these things out for the good of those who love Him, who are called according to His purpose. So alam mo lang na kapag meron kang kailangan pagdaanan na mahirap, alam mo lang, Lord, may nakaumang po na mga posibilidad dito. In fact, it could be in those times of difficulty and crisis that you get to know God near, in a very near way, and then it could also be those times of crisis that you experience the possibilities of His promise and of your relationship with Him. How can there be possibilities in the midst of crisis? Because the Lord is at work. Because He can make war cease to the ends of the earth. Because God is God, period. Because He is exalting His name and fulfilling His purpose. Because the Lord of hosts is with you. Punong-puno pa rin. The Lord of hosts is with us. He is with us. I pray that that be a huge source of comfort and strength and encouragement for us as we go through these times of crisis. In fact, sa mga susunod po na may pagdadaanan ulit tayo, kasi sabi nga natin, Okay? Parte po yan ng buhay. Alam niyo ba na pang 18 pa lang yata itong bagyo na to? Si Paeng? So, 16 yata na bagyo. Alam niyo ba na sa isang taon, 20 plus, pinagdadaanan natin each time? So, hindi pa talaga tapos. Pero, hopefully that helicopter view of seeing God is enthroned, God is at work, God is working out His purpose, God remains to be God, would help you respond to each and every crisis that you'll ever face and go through in your life. And then come out of it with so many possibilities. To summarize that, no? Be still and know that He is God. And live out the possibilities offered by each crisis. Can we ask everyone to stand? We'll pray together. Salamat po na natuloy pa rin tayo mag-service kahit ng lakas ng ulan kagabi. Thank you rin sa inyo na pagpunta niyo pa rin. And we're in faith that the Lord will be the one to lift you up in the midst of all of your situations. Let's just take the next moment. I'm going to ask you to respond to God. To begin to talk to Him about this whole idea of being still. Kung meron pong bahagi ng puso mo na hindi pa mapalagay, na hindi pa makapagbitaw ng mga bagay na pinanghahawakan natin, na gusto nating magawa, na pinipilit natin, sa halip, God is inviting you today and saying, will you be willing to surrender that, to let go, to stop resisting? Will you be willing to be still before me and know, recognize that I am God, not you? And will you be willing to stop struggling and begin trusting? We'd like to give you the next moments. Go ahead and just pray to God in your own words, right where you stand. Just let God minister to you as you tell Him that you wish to be still and to know that He is God.